Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our March session of the monthly eLID series. We had it postponed for reasons beyond our control. We are so excited to be here, finally here. And if you could just type in the chat, please, where you're joining from. Are you joining from Africa, in the UK, Europe, America? Just put in the chat where you're joining from. Great, great. Lagos, Nigeria. Yeah, welcome, welcome. London, UK. Yeah. Welcome, welcome. Milton Keynes, UK. Welcome. So I'm just going to share my screen now, just before introducing our speaker today. Yeah, great. So my name is Oyindamola Ojo-Eriamiato, aka Becca Mola. So I'm the founder of the eLearning Designers Hub, and the purpose of the eLearning Designers Hub is to help people in underrepresented communities, people who are basically underrepresented in digital learning design, to acquire skills in digital learning design. And we do this by having programs like webinars, we have workshops, and we have our first conference coming in May 8th and 9th, which we're really excited about. Is our first conference. I'm an e-learning designer. I'm an e-learning coach and mentor. I have experience adopting learning to generate revenue in different ways through digital learning initiatives. And I am the event board director at the Learning Network in the UK. And like I mentioned earlier, this is my initiative, eLearning Designers Hub. We used to be skill up initiatives, and our focus was on helping people, acquire skills in entrepreneurial skills, skills for their career. But now we have decided to narrow it down to digital learning design so that we can give the best to our audience. I mentioned earlier, in the eLearning Designers Hub, eLearning and Instructional Designers Hub, we have the eLID series, which is what we're having today. We have our free monthly webinar where we invite global leaders to join us and speak to us about trends in e-learning design, trends and best practices. We organize regular workshops, and we are having our first conference in January. So I would say, if you could tell me how you're feeling about your knowledge of L&D storytelling. That is what today's topic is about. What do you have much information, knowledge about L&D storytelling? Are you an expert, or you don't have any knowledge at all? So you want to tell, if you are an expert, you will fall in 1. If you don't know anything at all, that will be 4. And then if you don't really know anything, but you're eager to know, that would be 2. So let's hear what you have to put in the chat and then put in the chats where you are. 2. Okay, Neil says, okay, you're also improving. That's good to know. Great to know. Well, I would say I am 2 as well. I'm learning. I have some basic knowledge, and I'm really willing. I'm happy to be here because I'm going to be learning a lot from the experts. Neil himself. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Neil. I apologize if I haven't been doing that. So let's connect on social media, please. These are our handles: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. And I'm going to put in our WhatsApp group for you to join the community as well. So without wasting much of our time, I'm going to be introducing our speaker today, Neil John Cunningham. And Neil John Cunningham is the founder and L&D Solutions Director at Align Learn Do. He's worked in L&D for 15 years, and his passion is helping L&D teams improve their offering, through learning analytics and data storytelling. Very succinct. I know there is much more. You can tell us much more. This is a perfect summary of about Neil. So let's welcome Neil to today's session, and let's show some love in the chat, please. Let's show some love in the chat and welcome Neil to today's program. Welcome, Neil, and over to you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Oedemola. That was a wonderful introduction. So yes, hello, everyone. My name is Neil Cunningham, and I'm the, like Oedemola said, I'm the director and founder of Align Learn Do. Now, Align Learn Do is a learning and development consultancy, and we kind of focus on three things. We do custom built programs of learning, so where we design a specific workshop or set of workshops for a customer. We help startups and scale-ups build out their first L&D function, or we work with our mid-size and enterprise customers to help them improve their current L&D offering. So they'll have something in place, but they want to do it better. And whether or not we're building a workshop and getting that designed, or whether or not we're building out a first function, or whether or not we're helping a company reimagine what they're doing, we always use data storytelling to play back what we did to the business. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is that data storytelling can move you from being seen as a nice to have function, where you talk about, just this is what L&D did, this is what we designed, into a must have part of the business where you talk about this is what L&D did, this is how it affected the people on the program, here's what we plan to do next. And I thought a nice thing to talk to you about for kind of 15, 20 minutes would be, what is L&D data storytelling, and how can you as designers leverage that or think about where you fit into that story. So I'm going to share my slides now, but because of my weird setup, I'm not going to be able to see you or the chat while I'm running it. So if you've got any questions popped into your mind, please just add them to the chat, and if we've got time at the end, we'll answer them. So just give me a second, and I will share. And then I'm going to there we go. So what is L&D data storytelling? I'm hoping you can all see that first slide, and it talks about me, the facilitator, the founder and L&D solutions director. Before we get into the session, I thought I'd run through a quick. Oh, wait, great stuff. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Here's the couple of points that we're going to look over today. So I want to talk about why you don't need to be a data visualization expert, and how actually having too many visuals within the story that you're going to tell can make your audience disconnect from the work that you've done. I'm going to talk about why building a hypothesis is important. We're going to look at the difference between learning objectives and performance objectives, and why having those two split out can be key to telling your L&D data story. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can work with a finance group in your business, or the people team, to create a monetary unit for each of your performance objectives. I want to run you through my version of something called the hero's tale narrative model, which brings together the data that you've got and how the program ran, and it helps you shape the story so you can play it back. And then at the end, I'll talk very quickly about why it's important to be truthful with the story and how that builds credibility, and why being credible as an L&D practitioner when talking about data helps you be seen as a must-have part of a business, rather than a nice-to-have thing that kind of happens around the business when they need some learning. Okay, so without further ado, the first point that I wanted to talk about, visualization or data visualization, is I'm very pro data visualization. Like, I love a dashboard. I love being able to present data in a clean way. But what that data on the screen can't tell someone viewing it who doesn't know anything about L&D is what it means to them. And it kind of removes the people that you're helping through the learning and just makes them numbers on a spreadsheet or on a dashboard. It doesn't provide any context to the work that went into what you created and what came out of it, and then what outcomes you saw. And again, it doesn't put the person who is affected by that learning at the center of the story. good visualizations also don't help educate the business, and it doesn't help lift their understanding of what learning and development does, or of what designers do and how they impact the business. Yep. And finally, if you put a data set in front of someone and they've no background in L&D, it can be very difficult for them to interpret it. So they pick out those key headline points, and then they can start to make the story untruthful. So if they see that actually the program didn't have the effect you're expecting, it doesn't give them a truthful insight into what stopped it being a success. And so, like I said, I'm very pro data visualization, but I would much rather tell someone a story about how the program worked with some key visuals than rely on a dashboard to help them understand what you do. So where do we start when we're going to build out our L&D data story? Now, before we get on to the hero's tale, the narrative, I'm going to talk you through some key steps that will help you frame your story after the program is finished running, that you can do as you go along, which will help you tell the story. And that first step is building a hypothesis. And so, as you can see, the hypothesis is the start of your story. It's, you know, the people in your business don't know what they don't know. And so you've got to try and create a hypothesis that gives you a sense of direction for when you're going to build your learning. And the first place to think about this is what I call data plus desire. So there will be data all around the business, all around you, that isn't actually anything to do with learning because you haven't run something like this before. But it does give you some stories that you can use to build your hypothesis. So, for example, there might have been a fall in sales. That's data. Customer satisfaction scores might have gone down. That's a set of data. You might have a pulse survey from the people or HR team that says people aren't enjoying how they learn. There might be attrition data, so people are leaving in the first 3 months. All of these things are data sets that exist in the business that you can use to have conversations with different senior leaders. And through those different conversations, you can work out where does the desire lie to change these things. So you can focus your effort as an L&D team on a data set and working with people who have a desire to change something. Yeah. And then once you've got that data and desire, then you can build your hypothesis. And the hypothesis then supports your learning objectives and the performance objectives, which will then affect the outcomes and you building a return on investment model. And once you've done that once with this short, precise group, you can test it and then iterate it. So you can put a small group together, you can build a pilot group, you can run through your program and you can tell your story, and then you can start the whole process again. And what I thought I'd do is just share an example from a current customer that I'm working with. They are a utility provider, and they noticed that 50% of their new starters in one area of the business were leaving in the first 3 months. So that's 50% of new starters. So it was about 15 people out of 30 that were losing every month. And so that's the data that we've got. That's some data that we had from the people team, these people leaving in the first 3 months. When we looked at the exit interviews, we found that those people that were leaving, a common theme was that managers weren't supporting them enough. That's what the phrase was. When we did some more digging with the managers, we found out they weren't having one-to-ones, they weren't coaching, offering feedback, no one was goal setting like they should do. And so we had these different data sets. And so I talked to the people team. We said, look, the desire here is to reduce turnover in the first 3 months. We know that managers aren't having these one-to-ones and they aren't doing coaching, feedback, and goal setting. And we believe that by upskilling them in this through our learning objectives and by observing them back on the job through our performance objectives, doing this, it will make a difference in the number of people leaving and turnover in the first 3 months. And so I said, okay, well, let's build a small pilot group. Let's test this and iterate it and see what the story says. So that's our hypothesis. By upskilling our managers with coaching, feedback, and goal setting skills, this will lead to better support for new starters, and this will reduce turnover in the first 3 months. And the final thing I'll say on the hypothesis is they are usually full of assumptions because you don't know what you don't know. So it's okay if it's loose. You're here to test something and to be a little like an inventor and see what works and what doesn't work. And the final thing I'll say, the great thing about a hypothesis is you can headline it as part of your story when you sit with the SLT and you go, this is what we wanted to find out. This is how we went about finding it out. So once you've got your hypothesis, this is where your design comes in. And I'll talk very quickly on this. You've got your hypothesis at the start, then you've got your learning objectives, right? So during the design phase, your learning objectives focus on the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that people are going to learn while they're in the program. Yeah. So that's where you're using things like Bloom's taxonomy of verbs to go, by the end of this program, people will, and to what level you need people to get to. So that's the learning objectives. This will become important when you're playing your story back later on for people to understand that aren't in L&D, that learning objectives and performance objectives are different. It will help highlight the work you do and the work that goes into making a program successful. Then we look at our performance objectives, and your performance objectives should focus on how the learning objectives will be applied back on the job. So if in our example, we're talking about managers being better at feedback, coaching, and goal setting, the performance objective should be about them applying it within a one-to-one situation. Yeah, and how do we observe that? And how do we test for that as well? I'm not going to go into how we measure learning or test it within this little webinar, because that's a whole other subject in itself. But it's good to know that this will help you tell your L&D data story. And then out of that, you get your kind of business change and ROI. So if you've got your learning objectives and performance objectives, how did that change the business, and what's the return on investment that you've seen? Okay. And so when we're talking about return on investment and how we work with finance, is a really simple structure for building out an ROI model, which is the savings made through the program minus the cost of the program to give you ROI, return on investment. So let's say, for example, with our example, savings could be saving on hiring costs, and the finance team and the people team would be able to tell you what it costs per head to hire someone in the business. And if you can reduce that, there'll be a saving there. We could talk about retraining costs. So if we're not having to retrain people every 3 months, what's the saving to the L&D team of that? Yeah, or the managers who train them. There are savings to the managers who have to do the interviews. So what's the time saved by these managers not having to redo these interviews on top of their work? So all of these savings can be added up and bundled together. Within the costs, you then remove operational costs if you want to, such as an L&D team member's time or the technologies that we used. You don't always have to remove operational costs because you would have spent that money anyway, but it's something to consider. You might want to remove capital investments, such as external partner costs or designers you had to get in from outside the business to help, anything that wouldn't have been in the normal day-to-day running of your L&D team. And then you might want to put in there business impacts costs. So if you need to take managers off the floor, as it were, for say 2 days over the program, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is, what's that time cost to the business? Yeah, so that you've got a good set of totaled costs that the program accrued, and then you just do savings minus costs gives you an ROI, so a return on investment. And one thing I like to do within ROI is to set a point 6 months after the program and measure the performance objectives and the business change over that 6 months to create an ROI 6 months later. So our ROI statement might be the savings generated over 6 months through lower cost to hire, retraining new hires, and the time managers saved in interviews was £40,000. The program cost £20,000 to run. So over 6 months, we've doubled the return on investment. We have 2 times return on investment over 6 months. And the reason I like to do this is it shows the business, well, hopefully if it's been successful, what they've made and what their return for their investment is, but also that you're thinking long term. It's not just like one and done. You're thinking really strategically about how programs affect the business. Okay, so if that's how you can go about very, very quickly thinking about how you set up a program and some of the data that you can collect and a little bit of an ROI model, we're going to talk about now the hero's tale. So here's our hero in his Superman outfit. Now, the hero's tale is also known as the hero's journey, and it's a narrative structure that a lot of novels follow. And within the original idea of it, there were 12 sections. But as I've evolved this over the past kind of 5 or 6 years, I've boiled it down into 7 sections, 7 slides that you can put in front of senior leaders to grab their attention, put the people you're helping at the heart of the story, but also educate them about what you do and what the effect of the business has gone on. And I'm going to run through it very briefly, quite quickly with you now. So one, our story begins. This is where you highlight the data and the desire. So this is the data that you had. Here's what we wanted to achieve. This is the story that pulls those senior leaders in. So this senior leader wanted to see a change in people leaving the business. And you can present this back to them, or you can present it to other senior leaders, and it helps pull them into this idea that some data exists that can help them improve the way that they work. Now, within the story, usually when the story begins, the hero doesn't know they're a hero. But once they get going, the hero meets people. And this is where you start building out the hypothesis, and you present what you wanted to change to the group that's attending this data story that you're telling it to. Yep, so this is where the hypothesis come in. This is what we wanted to change. This is how we planned to do it. As a hero moves through the story, they overcome obstacles with their little tribe that they've brought together. And this is where you talk about what happened in the program, just the logistics of it. So we're talking, if it's a pilot group, here's how we engaged them. Here's what the program layout was. Here's how many people attended. Here's how many people liked a blended version or wanted face-to-face. So you just talk about the actual structure of the program. This is a little bit where you can talk about what L&D has done. Sorry? Oh. Okay. Crack on.
Sorry about that. I think it was interference from someone's audio. Sorry about that.
That's okay, no worries. Once our hero has overcome those obstacles, though, the program, they are improved and they've got new skills. Now, this is where you can talk about things like satisfaction, quiz scores, whether or not people met the learning objectives. So this is where you start educating to the business about the people themselves. So this is how they felt about it. Here's how the learning objectives and whether or not they were measured and how people fared against those measurements. You can also talk about stuff here about benchmarking exercises that you might have done. Within the next stage of our hero's tale, once they've got these new skills, the hero usually goes on to battle a monster or a bad guy. And this is where they apply the new skills that they've got. And here's where just on a single slide, you can talk about the performance objectives, what business change you saw, and what ROI that created. A really succinct story that pulls through how people felt, the learning objectives, how that affected the performance objectives, how that affected the business, and what the return on investment was. So all of a sudden, within just 5 slides, you've taken people on this journey from the initial analysis right through to the ROI that you've produced for them. And the one thing I love about telling a story and within the hero's tale is that it doesn't end there. So usually within the story, the hero reflects, they take a moment, they have been changed, they look around their world and they ask themselves what's next. And this is where you can outline what the L&D team plans to do to improve the experience for the next set of people that are going to go through the program. So it shows the business that you are serious about continuous improvement and that you're thinking long term. And then finally, our story begins again. And this is where you take the people who are attending your data story back through new data sets, how you're going to plug in the data that you've got, and what desires and what things you want to change in the business. And that very quickly is the hero's tale. And on a final piece, there's a bit about building credibility. So I've just, sorry, whoever's got their mic on, could you mute it, please?
Yeah, one moment, please. Okay.
Thanks.
Ronke, please mute your mic. Thank you.
Thank you. With this last second, I promise, and then we can get to answering some questions. 3 things I always like to bear in mind when I'm building out an L&D data story: tell, build, and own. Tell the truth, right? If you're not honest now, it'll come back up and you'll lose all credibility. I know this. I was working for a very large utilities provider last year, and one of their leadership development programs I was asked to review. and they'd got a lot of data around how people felt about the program. And this person stood up and said, 100% of people have said that they found the program highly useful. I said, okay, that's great. How many people attended it? And this person said 150 people. Okay. How many people filled out your survey? He said 9. I thought, okay, so 9 people of the 150 said they found it extremely useful. If you try and fudge the numbers and don't tell a complete story, people will find out and you lose all credibility. So if you're truthful, you can build up that credibility. You can build kudos. People will see the L&D function as not just accountable, but also transparent and something that they can trust. Yeah. And that leads into the final bit, which is own. So if you have made a mistake, if something hasn't gone to plan, own that and talk about that within the data story, within that what's next and that new data and desire section, so that you can be seen as operating in tune with the business and not outside of it. Okay, so a little plug from me. My next book, Narrative for Numbers, Telling Your L&D Data Story, is out and it's coming out at the end of April. All fingers crossed. If you'd like to get a 10% discount code for that and be notified when it comes out, please use the QR code on the screen and enter your details. I'll leave it up for a few minutes after I finish speaking if anyone wants to do that. Yeah, leave your details. We'll get back to you with the code and the release date for the book. Okay, that's me. And that was a lot to go through.
Wow, that was amazing. I mean, that was really a brilliant session. Please, can you still keep the QR code on for a bit, or would you be able to bring it up later so that people can?
Yeah, sure. I could.
Let's be sure people have scanned it. Please be encouraged to sign up for this book. We have, from what we've had today, you can imagine if you now have to sit with Neil for an hour or two concerning your organization's data storytelling, you can imagine how much value you're going to get. I love the hero's tale process flow as well. I mean, Olama said that in the chat, and I love it as well. I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it? So does anyone have questions for Neil? I expect us to have questions coming in. I saw another comment before this one. Let's bring in our questions now. And Mobolaji said he loves the ROI impact story. It needs to tangibly qualify the result of the story. Absolutely. That's true.
Yeah. A bit of advice that I go into in the book is about the advantage of building pilot programs with small groups. So within the data story, it can be you need to talk about data correlations. So what we know and things we have seen that are moving in a direction, rather than causations, like being ultimately certain that the learning is the thing that has affected performance. So yeah, I think when you're starting out on this journey, just understand a little bit about the difference between correlation and causation. And if you want to prove that it was the learning that affected the business in the way that you wanted, see if you can run a pilot group and see if you can isolate people from organizational changes that might have affected how people operated.
That's a good tip. While we're waiting for questions, can we all try and put on our cameras so that we take a snapshot of this session while we put in our questions? I have 1 or 2 questions though, but I'm going to wait for people to bring in the questions. Please put on your camera. Let's take a picture. 1 moment, please. Gallery. Yeah. Great. Well, great to have you all here. Let's wait to see if more people will put on their cameras. I mean, we're 11 people here. Let's come on. Okay, this is good. Thank you. So does anyone have any question concerning data storytelling? quest. Oh, Precious just came up. Okay, more people putting on their cameras. Let me take another picture. Yeah. Great. One moment. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so let's have more questions. Yeah, no worries, Karen. Do you have any question? Okay, so Olama is asking, do you have a template to share on the hero's tale? That question is for you.
I mean, you can find lots of different versions, lots of templates for the hero's tale out there. It's not new. I first learned about it about 5 or 6 years ago. So just Google the hero's tale or the hero's journey, and you'll see a template for it. There is one in the book that I use, so that's going to stay in there for now. But if you wanted to think about it in those 7 steps that I showed you earlier, yeah,
Great.
that will be out there.
So
Yeah,
now,
I
put
think
up the QR code again so that people can scan it.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I keep removing it because I want to see everyone, and I can't see whenever I share. So let me
Okay, yeah.
let me share it. Let me share this
Okay.
again.
All right.
Do.
Karen, the session is being recorded, so I'm going to make it available and share. Okay, yeah, so that's the QR code. Please ensure to scan this and be on the waiting list for the book. I know Neil very well. Neil, please, can you put your LinkedIn profile in the chat as well so that people can follow you? Neil is always sharing L&D story tips on LinkedIn almost every week. So if you follow him, you'll be able to, learn more about data storytelling. And if you ask me, this session has been very, very impactful. A lot to take in. I'm personally going to go back and watch it again and ensure that I practice some of the things that I saw there. The question I have for you, I know you said it might take a long time to explain how you did the hypothesis and the process for the case study that you gave us. Can you give us a little more insight into what you did in that, in the case study? I know it will take a long time, but just summarize it for us.
So we looked at the managers that were losing the people. So the data said we're losing 50% of our new starters. We identified which managers were most at risk of losing people. So we really narrowed down our focus. We then put those people into a pilot group. So we insulated them from the rest of the business. We said, look, these are going to be in a pilot group. Their ways of working aren't going to change. We then benchmarked where they were at against our key skills, coaching, feedback, and goal setting. Then we worked with the design team to build learning based on where those people are at and where we wanted to get to. Just put this in the chat. Then the performance measurement was about observing the behavior back on the job. And again, there's lots of different ways you can do that, but we did a mixture of self-review, 360 review, we used some of the systems or tools they had internally for them to log how they felt about it and how it was doing. We then monitored within this group how attrition was faring. And so this is where I talk about causation and correlation. And what we did find was that the people that were applying the learning back on the job, they weren't losing people in the first 3 months. Yeah, that people were staying with them. The problem is we had to go, okay, is that because they know they're being observed? Or is that because the learning's working? So we have to build that into the story, and we have to talk people through that being an element, which is why I talk about correlation rather than causation. And then what we played back to the business was, look, this is what it costs to set up this pilot group. These are the savings that we've seen just through these people not leaving the business. Yeah, so our very basic ROI is X amount. And what that did was go, okay, there is some positive data here that says there may be a case for running this out across the whole of the management group. And so that's what happened next. And that's where we were at.
Oh, great. Great. That's great insight into what you did. For those of us that are on the call now, we have a WhatsApp group where we have a community of L&D professionals. If you're willing to join, I've just shared in the group. We have a LinkedIn page, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and that if you have any topic that you'd like us to talk about in our monthly series, please, there's a form, a survey that you can fill to let us know what topics that you'd like to hear about, and then we'll ensure to get people who can deliver those topics. We have regular workshops, monthly workshops. The last time we did a workshop that took us almost a month, 3 sessions on 3 Saturdays, 2 hours each, to delve into scenario-based learning, and we're able to also create some courses, interactive courses using Genially. So if you would like to, upskill in e-learning development and instructional design, you want to join the group. And we also have a bootcamp going on, which is to help you transition into instructional design. If you want to transition to tech as a digital learning designer, instructional designer, we have our website, which I'll be sharing now. We have a website where you can find out all the information about it. Yeah, so you can visit our website, www.elidhub.org. Okay, there's a question here. I think I have 2 questions here. One from Mobolaji. It says, how do you revisit an L&D session to determine its effectiveness in a group or session? How long do you stay to monitor the effectiveness of a session? Neil?
Oh, I would design the I wouldn't stay to monitor the effect straight away. You want to build out how the effectiveness is going to be measured over time. Yeah. So, but this comes down to your preferred, learning design techniques, which is a whole other lovely part of L&D. But yeah, I wouldn't go for instant. Let me see, what was I say? I would build a learning solution that gives people tools that they can apply back on the job straight away, and then I would monitor how they use them over time. That's what I was trying to say there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. And to add to that, I would say evaluating learning actually starts, developing an evaluation strategy for your learning starts from the analysis stage. When you're developing your learning outcomes, you have you have objectives in place which are measurable, set while you're developing your outcomes, and these are the benchmarks for you to know whether your learning has been effective. Right from the beginning, you understand the gap that you're trying to fill. You have them lined out, you have them stated and documented, and that also results in the kind of content that you want to give them to fill those gaps. And as time goes on, you measure effectiveness based on what you set, the objectives you set in the beginning. And there are 4 stages of evaluation. Actually, you need to evaluate the session in terms of whether people have really acquired the knowledge that you want them to acquire. That could happen through quizzes, activities, assignments that you give them. There is the part of you knowing whether they are actually engaging with learning through observation. So these are things that you want to set. And there's also, like Neil said, there is the evaluation that you do to determine whether their behaviors have actually changed after they took, after they were done with the session, which will take time as you observe them in their jobs, and then lastly, through your data storytelling, you're considering how it actually affects your return on investment, which Neil has talked very much about today. So I hope those answer your question, Mobolaji. And we have another question here. Olama says, what you just shared, Neil, is the hero still linked to the performance objective? So she's asking if what you just shared before now is the hero still linked to performance objective.
Yes, so the hero's tale is the structure you would use to tell the audience the story of your program. So
Yeah.
it should also include a section about the performance objectives.
Yeah.
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 So I
Absolutely.
believe that was slide 5, if I've got that right. So if you've got these 7 slides, and it's our story begins, and they meet people, they overcome objectives. Then it's about them learning new skills, and then it's about how they applied them back on the job. So it'd be that slide, and that's where you could. So with our managers, it might be, 90% of those who invited were attended. Yeah, of those who attended, we saw that 50% were able to apply the learning back on the job and increase their skill set.
Yeah.
Of that 50%, 20% had one-to-ones. Yeah, and this delivered this change for the business. So it's just about feeding that story through as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. That's absolutely true. Do we have any other question before we wrap up? Do you have any other question? So feel free to connect with us on all our channels. They are all in the chat. Neil has also put in his LinkedIn channel. And so please let's network. You can also put in your LinkedIn profile in the chat for anyone to connect with you. Let's connect with ourselves, and feel free to join all our channels as well. So in the absence of any other question, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you. We really value your feedback. One of the links that I put in the chat has the heading survey. We would like to know how this session has been useful to you. Feel free to also make comments on LinkedIn and tag us, tag Neil, tag the eLearning and Instructional Designers Hub, and just let people know what you have learned and how valuable it's been. And I would reflection. Let's do a bit of reflection. Actually, we still have a few minutes to go. I would like us to put in the chat. What new thing have you learned today from today's session? What have you learned today? Anything at all? I know I've seen people put in the hero's tale. What is it? The hero's tale. Is there any other thing that you have learned? And after putting that in the chat, let us know what this means to you. What has this, reflected? What did you learn? How has it made you to see your current situation? Does it make you see that, okay, you need to learn more? You probably didn't know anything about data storytelling, or you knew some things and you have just learned more. What does this mean to you? Whatever you have learned, what does it mean? What have you learned from it? And then the next thing will be, so what? So what does this tell you? What next step are you going to take, considering what you have learned today? I hope that is clear. Neil is asking how to use Zoom. Oh, okay, great.
That's what I learned today. Yeah.
Okay, we can have a session on that. I'm pretty much sure if you Google if you just Google, a YouTube video will pop up to show you how to use Zoom. I'm very sure about that.
Yeah.
Or if you really want that, we could set it up. So tell me what you have learned.
I'm good.
What have you learned? And so what? What does this imply about your learning? Does it tell you anything about your attitude, about your method? Could you have done anything differently? I mean, what can you say what you learned has made you to discover about your knowledge in data storytelling? And then lastly, now what? What action are you going to take based on what you have learned? So Olama says, the session has made me realize that I'm on the right path on my L&D journey. Fantastic. Fantastic. I know you said you like the hero's tale, which suggests to me that you probably didn't know about it before now. So that's something that you can write. And then probably what you're going to do based on the question you asked before will be to look more into what the hero's tale is about. You know, Neil already gave us a tip. You could just go online and search it. You see, I'm sure you see resources that will tell you how you can apply it. Neil has actually told us how it can be applied in this session. If you want to watch this session again, yeah. So absolutely, that's fantastic. Thank you for that feedback, Bulama. So yeah, we have finally come to the end of this session. I want to thank you especially, Neil, for this, brilliant session that you've delivered. I mean, there's so much value packed into it. I'm going to go back and watch the video again and see how I can apply this to my a project that I'm working on right now. And I'm sure that other people that are watching now or that will watch the replay will find this very session useful. Thank you so much. And please, if you have scanned the QR code for Neil's book, ensure that you sign up for that book so that sign up for the waiting list so that when the book comes out, you will know that it's out. Thank you so much. And God bless. Let's show some love in the chat and thank Neil for the session. Thank you so much.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, great. Same here. Thank you. And bye for now. Bye, everyone. Bye. Oh, Mobalaji, are you raising your hand? You can unmute and talk. Well, I'm just seeing that raised hand.
No, I was just using it to say it was a lovely session. It was interesting. It just took me back to my L&D days when I took a serious course in L&D TAP certification, and I think there's a lot to go back and study, rekindle, and I really want to thank you for the session, Neil. It was absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you for coming along. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, finally, you say our final byes. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye. Bye.